So, last time we discussed the philosophy of recognition, and we were discussing the idea of struggle that's implicit really in the philosophy or the theory of recognition. And how does that begin? Well, famously, to return to the source sentence uh, that occurs in Hegel's work, The Phenomenology of Mind, consciousness exists in itself and for itself, in that and by the fact that it exists for another self consciousness. And here's the kicker: it is by being recognized. So, as Hegel sets it up, recognition is a core component of our identity. And the struggle comes in because our recognition, just as our understanding of reality is the case with our understanding of reality, is not a given in human experience. We have to win this recognition in one form or another, and it's a constant. Remember, for Hegel, uh, the idea of something being static is simply a non-starter. Um, as he puts it famously, being is the most empty of categories, the most empty thing we can say about something. It means exactly the same as nothing. Both terms are completely meaningless. It's only when we introduce the concept of becoming, of activity, that reality comes into play. And so all of our life is about being recognized in one form or another. If you think about this biographically, think about uh, different struggles you might have had up to this point. The struggle to be recognized as an adult, uh, the struggle to be recognized as a driver. One has to take a driver's test. You have to put yourself on the line and accomplish it. In academe, there's one struggle after another, all about the phenomenon of being recognized. And it is a struggle because there's this element of risk. Now, risk can be kind of mundane. If our parents don't recognize us as adults today, there's always the chance that's going to happen tomorrow. But as we get further and further into the philosophy of freedom, the stakes get higher and higher. Um, Hegel, who was the penultimate philosopher of history, loved to look to history for um, affirmations, but also negations of his various theoretical accounts of reality. And what he saw in history was that this struggle of recognition is uh, is dramatic, and it plays out against the backdrop of life and death. Um, so it's not just a matter of whether the driving instructor passes us, or the dean acknowledges our accomplishment. It's really about whether or not I'm going to live ultimately. And so if you look at the experiences of during the colonial era, um, what was the struggle? Well, the struggle was uh, the the natives, the indigenous people, were looking to be recognized as autonomous. That's not a given, right? The colonial powers saw them as quote unquote subjects. So this phenomenon of recognition plays out on multiple levels in human experience, and certainly the political level, the world historical level, are the ones that Hegel wants to draw our attention to. There's another kind of angle on this, and it's in the writings and teachings of Hannah Arendt. Um, Arendt draws attention to the fact that, with regard to this recognition, it's with human beings, it's direct. I'm confronted. I encounter you as another human being, I'm not mediated through an organization. Although, as later social theorists such as Marx will point out, groups, even classes, will confront each other and struggle for recognition at the level of society or at the level of the nation state. Back to Hegel, though. Why is recognition so important? Well, it's not just that, okay, I've been recognized for some accomplishment. This is the meaning that we often run into in popular culture. You know, this person's getting an award for acting, and we love to, see celebrities get awards, and they pat themselves on the back, and they get a swag bag and all that. So that's really not the kind of recognition that Hegel's talking about here. The reason why recognition is important in an existential way, in a political way, is because it's transformative. By going through the process of being recognized, by struggling to be recognized, I transform myself in the process. And one of the main ways that I am recognized is in a community. When I come into community, Hegel argues, I see my compadres, I see my friends, my comrades, and I struggle with them. They recognize me immediately. There's a deeply phenomenal philosophical encounter that takes place. I recognize the other, and the other affirms my existence as well. That provides a basis for identity that is at a much deeper level. It's much more profound than our, kind of mundane sense of what acknowledgement or vindication usually means. There's in literature, this has been picked up as a theme, as you might imagine. Famously, Heinrich Ibsen, in A Doll's House, where the character, is treated as a plaything, a doll, really, the title of the play, and has to actually struggle to actually win acknowledgement as being human, as being a full person. Similarly, in the films of Fellini, for example, one of his lesser films, The Organizer, Fellini goes into great detail about how the community comes to recognize these are laborers in 19th century Turin, how they recognize one another as fellow travelers, and how transformative that is. How do people go from being uneducated, isolated and alone, to being members of community and have an identity, a solid identity, one that's historically significant? Not overnight, but it happens through the process of recognition. I recognize you as a member of my community, and you in turn recognize me, and that's transformative. Another film that really plays into this idea of recognition in a very deep way is Ingmar Bergman's Seventh Seal, where the character of the knight really struggles with death. And the whole play is kind of an enactment of how the great actor Max von Sydow, who played the knight, comes to recognize the full measure of the human condition and the nature of death. And death plays such a pivotal role in Hegel's philosophy, because that's what's at stake here. It's not just a matter of being recognized, although these other forms of recognition play out in our daily life, but it's a matter of survival. And so in movements of liberation, what's at stake is actually the fear of death versus survival, and that's what gives such power to the communities which are struggling for liberation. The other note that Hegel's philosophy leaves us with is that this struggle for recognition is a part of the human condition. That is to say, There's no point at which I arrive where I'm finally recognized. You see this in Hollywood. Well, I feel like I've been finally recognized. No, for Hegel, this is something that never ends, and to a certain extent, we have to prove ourselves in the struggle for recognition every day. So that's enough, really, on this aspect of Hegel's philosophy. So much more to say about it. Thank you.